Maybe it's just because we had a prayer time. I'm glad you're here with us. Our goal each week is to reorient our lives around a rhythm of following God. And Jesus, actually, I'm going to read from the scripture today, but Jesus simplified that down to loving God with all your heart, mind, soul, and strength, and loving your neighbor as yourself. That's what we try to do, remind ourselves that this is who we want to be each week. So thanks for joining us. Ooh, going off the side stage, the green room. Thanks for joining us today. A quick announcement is we are going to be celebrating Easter as a community, and for all who would join us on Easter Day, which I think is April 17th, and we're going to be at Tico Time for the second year in a row. I think the best venue in the Four Corners area. And so we're going to get to do things like worship together and eat together, but also they're opening up their toys for us to play with. So it's just going to be a great time. I hope you can join us. So today we're continuing our series, which we've been talking about relationships. And let's see what I'm going to talk about today. Oh, I know. I said a few weeks ago that a youth pastor once told me, are you the kind of person that when you walk in a room, you are the there you are person, or you're the here I am person? And I've always felt like that was a helpful way to get myself out of myself, you know? And I could ask that again. Did you show up at church today saying, there you are? Or did you show up to church today saying, here I am? Now, what I want to do today is actually undercut that message. Can I do that? Here's the complexity of real life. Life isn't binary, is it? It's not as simple as there you are or here I am, is it? No, in fact, I want to bring up a couple scenarios to you, and we'll see if we can figure out the there you are and here I am balance. Here's the first scenario. I don't remember where I heard this, a book I read, I think, but a woman is on a public transportation system, and she sees a dejected man with a few kids, and the kids are just crazy, like tearing up everything. And finally, out of rage, she confronts the guy and says, hey, why don't you take care of your kids? And he looks up at her with sadness in his eyes, saying, I just left the hospital where their mother passed away, and I just don't know what I'm going to do. Here's the next scenario. A married couple, they keep trying to build their relationship, but every time they talk about finances, the conversation goes, fight, fight, fight. Here's the third scenario. Oh, I didn't ask if I could share this. This is a scenario that might not have happened at this church a few weeks ago. I'll look to the person in the audience and tell them if they can, if I can tell them who it is. Okay, here's what happened. Okay. A key volunteer in a theoretical church came in early to make sure that our lighting was better because it's been quite bad. And they tweaked all kinds of things and got everything ready, and then a theoretical pastor came in a few hours later and was annoyed that the lights were shining in his face, and without even saying anything, went right up to the lights and adjusted them away, only to interact with this theoretical volunteer later, and there was tension between them. That's theoretical. What do all these have in common? Well, they're all stories of communication. And here's the interesting thing about communication. Communication is always two-sided. It's always not just about me listening or you talking, right? In fact, there's probably more than this, but it's for sure 4 parts, okay? There's the communication and listening on my part, and there's the communication and listening on your part. And if we somehow are able to do those 4 things concentrically, we are able to connect together. The problem is it's really easy for all kinds of wrenches to be thrown in any of those four capacities. But if we do that, 2 plus 2 equals 1, right? Harmony. We said at the beginning of the series that harmony is the heartbeat of the kingdom, and that's because it is. We see throughout the scripture, Jesus intended harmony in our relationships. That's how we're supposed to function. But we feel all the time the lack of that, don't we? All right, I got a good church joke for you. You ready? It's on harmony. What was the disciples' preferred means of transportation? A Honda. Acts 2:46 says, so continuing daily in one accord in the temple. Yeah. But that is the posture of the community of God, right? Some of you didn't think that was very funny. Lighten up, right? Okay. See, here's the deal. In relationships, we want to experience harmony. And the basis of that is love. But the how of that is communication. And that's what we're going to talk about today. So before we talk about the how, let's talk about the why just for a little bit. 2 scriptures. Matthew 22, I said I was going to read it. Here's what Jesus said when he was asked, which of the commandments is the most important? He answered, love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind. This is the first and most important commandment. The second command is just like it. Love your neighbor as you love yourself. All of the law and the writings of the prophet depend on these 2 commandments. I think this is profound because this is ultimately what we are after. And if we're really after this, then our love relationship with each other has to be communicated in a way that that love can be grasped. It can be taken hold of, right? And 1 Corinthians, Paul takes this a little farther. He says this, love is patient and kind. Love is not jealous. It doesn't brag. It's not proud. Love is not rude. It is not selfish, and it does not get upset with others. Love does not count up wrongs that have been done. Love takes no pleasure in evil, but rejoices over the truth. Love patiently accepts all things, always trusts, hopes, and endures. I love that because it starts to get a little bit more specific. This is how love is supposed to function in our relationships. By the way, anybody read or hear that and say, ooh, that's hard. It's hard to be patient when somebody is annoying. Stop being annoying and then I'll be patient, right? It's hard not to be rude when you've stayed up all night taking care of a baby, right? It's hard not to be, or it's hard to be kind in every circumstance. Sometimes it just feels like the quickest thing out of my mouth is the best thing. Is this really always my standard? Well, I think maybe thinking of it as a standard is not the way. Maybe thinking of it as this would be the goal of the kingdom. This would be the goal of our relationships is a better way to think about it. And in the practical sense, all of this comes down to communication. It comes down to the how. How do we speak to each other? How do we be patient? How do we look each other in the eye? How do we actively listen to somebody? How do we get in the trenches with each other so that our relationships can model the kind of love that we want to experience? So today's, I'm going to do something I've never done before, all right? I'm going to do a sermon on my soapbox of communication. And I feel like this could just epically go wrong. And if it does, give me grace. See, here's the thing. When I speak, I try not to speak from my soapbox, right? Ever. I don't know if soapbox is even the right word, but I try not to just turn it into, here's DJ's opinion about how we should live, right? When you do that, you start talking about really personal and sometimes dumb things. Instead, I try to always just go back to, how do I understand that God communicated his heart to us through the scriptures and through our experience? That's what I always lean on, right? But today, I thought about it, and 15 years of being a pastor, communication has been the number one thing that I do practically day in and day out. And so I decided, you know what, I'm going to take a risk, and I'm going to give you my top 7 principles of how to do communication well, all right? So these are not God's principles, and these are the how. And when we get to the how, we've got to remember the why. The why is because God loves us, and he wants us to love each other. How? You got to do that out of your heart. You got to do that in the best way that you and I can. So before we do that, before we jump into the communication hows, I want to do a little communication test with you. How many of you would say that you are excellent at Gen Z speak? Some of you certainly. Say what? Let's go. All right. So today we're going to take a quiz. And the quiz is going to be, what do these 5 things mean? All right? You ready? This is all about communication. The first one's an easy one. You ready? Fam means bro, ugly, lame, or gross. Oh, don't say it out loud. This is a testing your own skills. All right, answer. Fam's a shorter word for family, but don't be fooled. It can be used to describe your friends or the way millennials use bro. I love that because I always say, what's up, bro? And I'm like, oh, that's so shoogy. Sorry, we're going to get there. So the next word, shoogy means, by the way, would you have ever expected it to be spelled this way? Okay, shoogy means, it makes me want to dance, silly, uncool, or offensive. You got your answer? Shoogy is a slang adjective mocking someone or something that is uncool. They're out of touch with the current trends and trying too hard to be trendy. Similar slang terms are basic or normie. Let me give you an example. Skinny jeans are so shoogy. I'm sorry. It's true. Life's changing. Now, I don't know what's not shoogy, so, I'm just the guy talking here, but this is real. Okay, how you guys doing so far? 2 for 2? All right, next one. CEO means you're in charge. Represent the institution. To master something, or you own a business. It means if you're a CEO of something, it means you've mastered it, or you're a pro. I'm so CEO at skateboarding. I'm not. I don't know. That's okay. Did you get that one right? All right, next one. Ghosting means to imitate someone, to ignore someone, to scare someone, or to go out at night with your friends. You guys know? Yeah. This term is common amongst earlier talking stages of relationship. Ghosting someone means you start ignoring them or stop texting them back. Did you get that one right? Okay, good. More of you said yes on that one. All right, last one. Bougie. This one's easy. If you're bougie, it means to get drunk. It means that you're fancy, that you eat organic food, or you're from a different ethnicity. Which one is it? Fancy. That's right. You got it. All right, let's take the quiz. Let's see how we did. Go to the last slide. Score. If you only got 1 or 2, that's a big yikes. Which evidently means really embarrassing. If you're a 3, you're a stan, which means you're a mix between a fan and a stalker. Sorry. If you got 4, I know what it means, but I don't know how to say it. Does anybody know how to say it? If you know, you know. If anybody ever says that to you, if you know, you know. And number 5 means you're woke. How many people are woke? Okay, all right. Some of you are good. What'd you catch in communication there? Somebody may think they're communicating something very clearly, but you may be receiving that very different. And what affects communication? our age, our gender, our emotions, our ethnicity, our story, where we come from, our background, our experiences, so much affect if you and I are able to communicate. All right, let's go for it. I've got 7 communication tips. Number 1, come in a good way. I'd never heard this before. A friend of mine said that they practice this in every meeting, which means, now we're not doing the Shugi contest anymore. This is like my own words, okay? We good with that? This is my first tip. My first tip in relationships and communication is you got to recognize the state you're coming to when you're in a relationship. And when I say come in a good way does not, to me, mean that we stop being whoever we were and we show up now as the perfect performance person ready to be in that conversation. No, to come in a good way means we recognize that our whole self is what is involved in communication. If you're having a bad day, you got to learn how to have a bad day and be in communication, how to be able to share that with somebody, be present with yourself, that probably when you have a bad day, it causes you to look down more or look away more or be embarrassed more or look at your phone more or whatever it is more. When we come in a good way in a relationship, my friend, by the way, he taught me this about when he has meetings. They say we want to come in a good way. And one of the ways we do that in our meetings at the church, when our groups get together, is I make everybody do a feelings list. And what we do is we walk through a feelings list, here's all the feelings that you might feel, and we say, I feel this, and here's why. And we do that because we recognize that in communication, we're coming together as whole people. And whatever we just came from affects where we are today. And unfortunately, so many of us, when we come to meetings or when we engage with people, we try to shut off ourselves. And the problem is that it gets out. It squirts through the gaps. And it affects how we communicate with each other. Yesterday, I went to Zia. I have a friend that I've been friends with for a long time. And he works at Zia. And so we're going through. This friend is always like, DJ, what's up? And I'm always like, hey, how's it going? Insert name. And this friend of mine this was yesterday, he had a massive mask on, and he didn't even acknowledge me. And I was like, hey, is that Mike under there? Oh, sorry, I said his name. Dang it. There's a guy named Mike that works at Zia in Farmington. And, okay, anyway, so the point is, he hadn't recognized, or maybe he had, that whatever had happened in his life. I mean, what it made me want to do is say, hey, can we catch up real quick? You doing okay? Part of coming in a good way is coming in your whole self. Second tip, get out of your head. This is a tough one. So many times we tell stories about the relationship we're in. You know, some of us know really well how to smile and do all the right things to make somebody else think we're communicating with them. But let me tell you, real communication is yourself and their whole self. Actually, the best kind of communication is when you can look somebody in the eye, you can be fully who you are, they can be fully who they are, and you can connect in the middle of that. I would say that's to be fully integrated. But it's hard to do that, isn't it? Because there's this wonder, like, are they going to accept me for who I am? Are they going to accept me if they would know right now that I feel offended by something they said? No, it's a lot of times easier to just try to shut it off and say, put the smile on or whatever, In our early marriage, Vanessa and I, she would always assume that when I hurt her, I was doing it intentionally. And I would never know. And it would be way better if she was here. She's serving in the kids. Because she could defend herself and also say, she gave me permission to say this, but she could also share what was her journey. But in a lot of ways, her journey and her family systems, we've said that God's in your heart, but grandpa's in your bones, In a lot of ways, our family system teaches us how to deal with conflict. and all kinds of communication things. Well, in her family, the way you dealt with conflict is you basically tried to say, this doesn't matter, right? I don't want to be a block or an impediment, and so I'm just going to stuff that down and try to keep going, because they probably didn't mean to, right? But then, of course, that festers, and it turns into something that becomes nasty. And a lot of times she would say, well, when you hurt me then and then and then and then, when it all blow up, I'd be like, wait, I hurt you then and then and then and then? I don't read your mind. And in the same way, if you're going to be in a good communication with somebody, you've got to take that vulnerable step of being willing to share where you're at. My guess is that every single one of us in some way have a relationship right now that is strained. And most of us in those strained relationships try to ignore it as much as possible, hoping that it'll go away. I don't think hoping it will go away ever helps towards mutually experiencing love together. That's what causes that wall we talked about last week, where it builds and builds, and then resentment happens and unforgiveness, and we distance ourselves. The only thing you can own in a relationship is yourself. Somebody may not be able to handle yourself, but I think we could do a lot better about bringing ourselves to relationships. Speaking of ourself, the next one is setting boundaries. Now, this one's something that feels counterintuitive in communication. We think in communication that we just should always be, if we're going to try to love somebody, we should always be ready to connect with them, right? And if they have to do something last minute, well, then I should have to do something last minute. Well, there's a really interesting story in the Bible about 10 bridesmaids. Jesus tells this. And it's fascinating. It says that the bridesmaids were waiting for the bride to come. It got late, they got tired, and they all fell asleep. When the bride came, they all woke up. 5 had been prepared, and their lamps still had oil. 5 had been unprepared, and their lamps didn't have oil. And what they did is, of course, you can imagine, the ones without oil said, please, can I have your oil? And the ones with oil said, I'm sorry, but I only have enough oil to function today how I'm supposed to function as the bridesmaid. You're going to have to go get your own oil. It says that they ran out to get the oil, and they came out and they missed the party. And Jesus said, make sure that that's your life, that you don't run out of oil when you need it. Now, there's lots of applications for that story, but one of the biggest ones is you are responsible for you, not everybody else. And by the way, you are a mere mortal, and so am I. You're a human that needs sleep. You have emotions. You get sick. You age. You experience all of the ups and downs of life that you maybe don't want to. And that means you're limited. It's so hard to grasp or to welcome our limitedness. And a lot of us run ourselves ragged trying to be unlimited. But then when we do that, we don't show up well for anybody, do we? How are some ways that I set boundaries? One is I think you have to plan for what you need. You have to look at your week and rhythmically function within your thriving schedule. One of the things we do, we take a Sabbath. I remember 3 years ago, Vanessa said to me, you don't have to respond to every email and text. You know that, right? I was like, no, but I'll be letting them down. It was this massive problem where sometimes at night at the dinner table, I'd be texting, trying to catch up on all the things of the day instead of being present with my family. And, so she gave me permission to not text or email people back right away. Another thing is I put my phone away at night and on weekends. If you try to call me or text me, I just might not get back to you. These are boundaries so that when I am engaged, I can be all there. And we all need some boundary out of our own design. The second way of having boundaries is, everybody say this with me, saying no. Did you just say yes? Mm-hmm. Yeah. We've got to learn how to say no at appropriate times. Recently, a friend of mine who leads a ministry asked me to lead a group with him in San Diego, of all places. And it was in May, and it was right around Memorial Day, and our girls are going to run a race, and they're getting pumped about that sort of thing. And I knew that if I said yes, I would burn our family out. But I did not want to say no because I didn't want to hurt my friend's feelings. And I wrestled with this, and I kept putting it off. And instead of responding, I kept saying, I still need to talk to Ness about that. But really, I knew the answer. I just didn't want to say it. Now, finally, I did. But the point is, that's all of us. If we're going to communicate well, we need to be in positions to communicate well, which means sometimes means we can't communicate at all, right? And again, we'll have to extrapolate this into each of our circumstances, but that's one way to set boundaries. All right, the next tip. Is this a fix-it or a listening moment? Have you ever heard this before? I am so confused in most of my life. I don't know why people are telling me the things they're telling me. Do you want me to fix it? Great, I'll fix it. Do you want me to just listen and hear you? Great, I'll listen and hear you. Here's the thing, most of the time I get those two things wrong. Let me give you a tip. Just ask. Would you like me to do something to help you? Or would you just like me to hear this? By the way, you will build so much trust with people if you can get the answer to that right when people are sharing. Sometimes people just need to vent. But by the way, venting sometimes can feel offensive or it can feel oppressive. I don't like it when people vent. I want to fix it and get it over with and stop them from venting. But sometimes people need to vent. And then other times, some people need help getting things fixed. They need somebody to walk along their side. And it is so helpful to know the difference. This week, Vanessa and I were in the middle of an argument. Yes, we get in those things. And we're in the middle of this, and our girls are there, and you never know how much it's going to escalate. You know, is this like a moment where we need to go to the back room, or we can just do this there? But finally, I wisened up and realized, I think I'm trying to fix it, and I think she just needs me to listen. And about that time, she said, stop trying to fix me. I just want you to listen. It totally cleared up the situation. Because all of a sudden, the vitriosity, we could just be there together. All right, here's my next tip. Actively listen to understand. All right, don't just go, uh-huh, 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 uh-huh. The key to having a connected relationship is when we're really trying to draw out the other person. And so don't fake the listening thing, but make sure that you're actively listening to understand someone. I found this to be so helpful for me to say, what do I not understand about this situation? And now I've constantly started to put that into my practice when I hang out with anybody. What do I not understand here? It's really easy to think that you know all about other people's lives. You just don't. You don't know their background. Even if they've told you, you haven't walked in their shoes. Even if you're married to them and you're constantly interacting, the truth is you probably don't understand every situation or any situation. And that means you can approach the conversation intrigued, saying, oh, tell me more about that. Now, here's a couple practicals for this. One, let's talk about active listening. Did you know that, I think I put this in the email, but 70 to 93% of communication is nonverbal? It's not what you say, it's how you say it. And that absolutely goes for listening. So, eye contact. I thought this was interesting. Did anybody notice this during Mask World? Where do we look? I find it intimate and sometimes too hard to look somebody in the eye. I find myself wandering around their face. And frankly, I would just encourage you to work on that. It's like a muscle that needs to be built. That's a connective muscle. Learn to look people in their eye. And then here's a big one for me. Put your phone away. Don't put it on the table. Don't have it on ring. Don't clap at me for this. Your watch, the same thing. Did you know that every time you look at that communication device when someone is talking, you're telling them something? In fact, you're telling them 4 times more than what they're getting from the rest of your language. So 4 times more, you're saying, I'm really interested in what everybody else has to tell me, not you. Active, be intentional. It might get you in trouble in terms of being late to other meetings because you spend longer with people. But I would have that as a problem as opposed to the one of a disinterested friend. Here's another practical. Don't formulate your responses. You ever notice yourself doing this? They say something and immediately you're like, oh yes, this is an argument and I think I'm going to win. Okay, so they said that, I think I'm going to say. You ever catch yourself doing that? In fact, sometimes I think when we feel insecure in relationships, that's what we tend towards because we want to be confident in our response. But unfortunately, then what we're doing in that moment is we're turning our focus from you to me. You ever talk to somebody where you can tell the intention of this conversation for them is to talk? I mean, is that life-giving for you? Is that what you wanted, like to sit down and hear them talk for an hour? If you're communicating, probably the answer is no. Probably you wanted a give and take. But give and take is a vulnerable proposition because you can't just give a series of talks to that person, You've got to interact and listen and be okay with uncomfortable white space when you get to the end. I would say default on learning to ask great questions. Here's some questions that I use. What intrigues me? This is for me. What's intriguing right now? What do I not understand? And here's a big one. How does it feel to be you? I don't always ask that directly, but I'm always thinking it. When somebody's sharing, how does it feel to be you? That helps me communicate and connect. All right. Talking too long, so I'm going to do the last 2 quick. Last one, or two ones. One, personalities. And they greatly dictate how somebody communicates. Did you know that? Did you know that other people don't think like you? Did you know that they don't communicate the same way you do and that their language of connection is different than you? I would say become a studier of personalities. Become somebody that is very intrigued by what personality somebody is and how that drives them so that you can connect with them and understand them. And if you do, I think the diversity of that relationship will help you learn how to thrive. We said earlier that we want to be differentiated and connected in a relationship. Differentiated means you can be your personality and I can be mine and we can still be connected. It may be hard, because your mode is different than mine, but we can do it. All right, last thing, encourage people. I think there's just not enough of this in our world and in our lives. I love that Jordan Peterson article that I mentioned a week ago. He said, give precise, meaningful praise. And this was his tip, by the way, of having better relationships. How many of us would thrive if our world was just normal at giving precise, meaningful praise? Here's what I want to encourage you to do. In your next time that you have a connection with somebody, see if you can give them precise, meaningful praise. See if you can look them in the eye and say, you know what, here's just something I absolutely appreciate about you. I think it'll go a long way towards helping us have the kind of relationships we want to have. That's all I had tonight. I want to actually Yeah, I'll do this. Doug, come up here. Yeah, sorry, buddy. Boundaries? So this is how I wanted to close the service because I just wanted to show you how powerful it is to encourage someone. So, Doug, this is just role-playing a little bit, but it's actually real. It's not like...
I'm scared.
Yeah. Doug, over the last, I don't know, what's it been, 2 years or a year that we've gotten to know each other?
A couple years.
I have just become amazed at the heart that you have. You've been through a lot of ups and downs in your life. I think there was a time when you had this trajectory of what it was going to look like, and then I think it turned different. I know. Don't deflect. That should have been my point number 8. And the way that you have kept a soft heart and love people through that all, it just amazes me. And when I think of my life as a 39-year-old, and sometimes I verge on cynicism, and I sometimes wonder if life would be better if I could just get out of this whole pastoring gig. I do. I look at guys like you, but especially you lately, because you're a person that you don't just live life how you should, you live it from right here. I want to be like that when I get older. And I really value you and appreciate you. Thanks. Ooh. Thanks, Doug. That may feel awkward for you if you're not into that sort of communication. But I think what you just experienced there is harmony as the heartbeat of the kingdom. We're built to be a family. We're built to be together. And our world is so full of division that sometimes we don't know if there's anywhere where we can get that kind of love. Friends, you can get it here if you give it here. I mean that in this church context. I mean that in your marriages, in your family. Start taking risks to really intentionally value communication. Jesus, I just pray that you would bless us as we walk away today with the gift of being great communicators of your love for each other. We pray this in Jesus' name. Amen. God bless you guys. Have a great night. We've reached up to God. Now, let's reach out to others.